Hey everyone, I'm Jack Fossett, and today we're going to shoot out 5 different Bluesbreaker overdrive pedals, including an original Marshall Bluesbreaker from the 90s, courtesy of Maine guitars. Now the Bluesbreaker is kind of a modern classic as far as low to kind of mid-gain overdrives go, and it's a pedal that is responsible for many of the boutique pedals that have come out over the past couple of decades. We're going to start out with a Stratocaster going into a VHT D50 amp clean. Now with this being a low to mid gain overdrive, playing with the Stratocaster into the amp clean, you'll notice that with the knobs pretty neutral, there's almost no grit if any. So for the second part, we're going to play a Les Paul into the same amp, but with the amp already overdriven, so that you can hear both how it works with a clean signal, and then also how it works pushing an amp into a more saturated state. Let's get started with the Stratocaster here. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Follow the links below where you can listen to some music, and I hope you enjoy. All right, so you see we have the original 90s Marshall Bluesbreaker, the pedal that started it all. We have an Analog Man Prince of Tone, a Snouse Black Box 2, a Vic Audio Mount Pleasant, and a Moore Blues Crab. So we're really covering a whole range of Bluesbreaker style overdrives here, including the original, the vintage, rare vintage. Well, it's, it's a few years younger than I am. It's vintage. The original Marshall Bluesbreaker, some that are highly sought after, boutique ones that are a little bit hard to come by, and then a few that are much easier to come by nowadays, and really kind of show you a bunch of different Bluesbreakers and Bluesbreaker inspired circuits. Now, the Bluesbreaker I've always felt like is my overdrive. The very first overdrive pedal I ever had was the Tone Bug Marshall, the Bluesbreaker 2, which is actually a great pedal. It's not the original Bluesbreaker, but it's a great pedal in its own right, and I shamefully sold that one, as many of us do. We pass on gear and then regret it, and then we want to get it back, and this is part of the story. I'm sure many of you can relate to this, but anyway, the original Marshall Bluesbreaker. Now, that one and the Analog Man Prince of Tone are on loan from Maine Guitars. I do want to mention this is not a sponsored video. They're just on a friendly loan. There's no money changing hands. There's no commissions or anything going on like that. The only pedal that I have as part of any sort of review deal is the Snouse, which I fulfilled the review deal years ago. That's also one of my favorite pedals, but there's no sponsorship from Snouse for this video. So we'll start with the original Bluesbreaker. Now, the original Bluesbreaker had a short run in the early 90s, and there was a whole range of Marshall pedals that came out there. Now, you have to keep in mind the context of the time. In the early 90s, guitar music was significantly dominated by very, very high levels of gain. Whether you're talking about the end of the 80s hair band hard rock era, or the beginning of grunge and even some commercialized punk, which is something that I still don't even understand how that exists. Are you really countercultural if there's a corporate store that's dedicated to your style? Hot topic, try new lean topic too. Guitar was dominated by gain at that time, and the Marshall pedals had several, including the Shredmaster, the Drive Master, the Governor, which is another really popular one, and the Bluesbreaker. Now, the Bluesbreaker was billed as trying to get the sound of a classic Marshall amp, of course, like the Bluesbreaker amp, the Eric Clapton combo. The interesting thing about it is it's really just a great, again, low to mid gain overdrive. It's not a modeling pedal, and that's a very important distinction to make, especially nowadays, because at that time the concept of trying to get an amp sound from, something like a pedal was way different than nowadays, when you have things like Fractal and Helix, where you can actually really emulate the sound of something using a pedal. The Bluesbreaker does not make you sound like you're playing a Marshall all of a sudden, in my experience. It does have its own unique tone. It's not completely transparent. It adds this kind of nice, slightly upper mid-ranginess, but not at all like a tube screamer, and it has this very, very slight hint of compression. It is more transparent than not, but it has its own character. It's a really, really lovely pedal to use and pairs well with a lot of different guitars, pairs well with a lot of different amplifiers, and at various ranges of gain, whether you want to use it as a clean boost, whether you want to use it for its drive or whatnot. Now, what I have found interesting about plugging into the original Marshall Bluesbreaker, it in itself is a great pedal. They are expensive and they are rare. So I think for the most part you get the original if you're something of a collector. I don't think it's anything like a situation like the Klon Centaur where, and the prices of those have just gotten completely ridiculous, but where it in itself is the sort of pinnacle high standard that all others sort of try to emulate and try to reach. I actually would view the Marshall Bluesbreaker kind of like the iPhone 1, right? It was amazing in its own way. It was, again, a new take on an overdrive that was different than a tube screamer, that was different than a Boss. However, it has been improved upon, in my opinion, with some of these other pedals that are out there, including some of the ones that I'm playing today. For instance, I actually think several of the other pedals are objectively better and more versatile than the original Marshall Bluesbreaker. Again, the original is a great pedal. I'm not poo-pooing it. I'm not putting it down or anything. But for instance, it doesn't have a ton of power. It doesn't have a ton of gain on tap. It can be a little bit thin sounding depending on how you dial it in. So other pedals have taken that and improved upon the design, taken that amazing character that it had and expanded upon it. So we're going to move on to the next two, which are the Analog Man Prince of Tone and the Snouse Black Box 2. Now these are two of the top end inspired by Bluesbreaker pedals. They're just amazing pedals by amazing builders, really capture the sound, but also give you a lot more flexibility. What's interesting about them is that they are also expensive and they are harder to come by. With Snouse, there's currently a wait list of, I just checked it and I believe it's at least I think it's 18 to 21 months. And I know that with Analog Man, at least with the King of Tone, there are wait lists as well. Again, they're more expensive. I will say that they both live up to the hype. Whether or not you want to get on a wait list and get them, that's something that is entirely up to all of you. Depends on your situation and your needs, and that's something that I will allow other people to have angry internet forum arguments about that I'm just not going to get into. I will say that they live up to their hype. I think both of those pedals are excellent. The Prince of Tone is also on loan to me from Maine Guitars so that I can do this video for. The Snouse is mine, and that is absolutely probably pound for pound my favorite pedal. That one is also special to me because it's dated the day that one of my daughters was born. The day she was actually born was the day that that pedal was completed before I got it. So that's kind of a special pedal for me. What's interesting about these two, and I'm keeping them in fairly standard mode here, but they will each do quite a bit of different things as well. The Prince of Tone has additional modes like distortion and boost, as I have it on the overdrive mode. The Snouse does a load of things with some internal dip switches, and it also has the boost and the presence control. So you can really, again, expand on the sound of the original Bluesbreaker, but you can also just get that classic Bluesbreaker tone in a really rich way. So if you do get an opportunity to get one of these pedals, I would highly recommend it. Now, if you don't have an opportunity to get one of these pedals, the next pedal on the list, in my opinion, is just as good. It has not been as sought after. It's a fairly new pedal from a smaller company. It's only been around for a few years. That's the Vic Audio Mount Pleasant. Now, I do want to mention that I absolutely will sing the praises of Vic Audio all the time. I would probably consider myself somewhat biased in favor of Vic Audio. Vic Audio was the first company that I ever did any sort of reviews in collaboration with. It's part of the reason why I'm doing videos the way that I do today. Is a small company run by a guy named Mike in Arizona. He makes great pedals, and I would love to see more Vic Audio pedals get out there. I think the Mount Pleasant really stands up to every other pedal on this list, and this is one of the reasons why I wanted to include it on there. Now, this one comes in at about $144, I want to say, and you can get them right now. Now, mine is in a custom enclosure, which you can also inquire about. The standard ones, I believe he's doing right now in a matte black finish, which also looks great. And that one has two different modes as far as high cuts. So, again, you know, with the original Bluesbreaker kind of having a brightness to it and everything, there are two different high cuts on top of the tones knob so that you can really tailor it to different amps. Now I'm going to keep it on the no cut, kind of keeping them all in the standard mode, but that pedal is super versatile and also has a little bit noticeably more gain than some of the other pedals on the list, but it still does the Bluesbreaker thing absolutely beautiful, has a richness to the tone and has quality to the tone that is just great. Now the last pedal that we're doing is the Mooer Blues Crab. This one has been loaned to me by Steve Sterlacci. Steve also has a YouTube channel, so you should check that out. I'm going to put that in the description. Thank you, Steve, for loaning me this pedal so that I could do this shootout and give you, again, the whole spectrum of Bluesbreakers that are out there. Now, this is a mass-produced import pedal from Mooer. This comes in at about $68. I will say two things about this. It is definitely the subpar one of these pedals. However, the rest of the pedals in this video are really good, and I will say that this one is usable. I don't think it's as good as the others, but I don't think it's unusable. I don't think it's necessarily a bad pedal. I think especially for someone who thinks they might want the Bluesbreaker sound, either if you're just kind of trying it out and you don't want to shell out more money at first, or if it's a sound that you think you'll just use once in a while and you just kind of want to have it on hand, I think something like the Blues Crab is more than passable. It's a decent sound. Again, it's usable, particularly when you get into a live band setting and everything. I think it's a fine pedal. I think it sounds good, and at the price point, it is pretty hard to argue with. But I did find that when it came to the quality of the tone, it did lack the richness of the others, and it didn't quite have the really singing power that the others had. The Wampler Pantheon is another excellent Bluesbreaker inspired one that does just a load of different things, and there are many other Bluesbreaker pedals out there, so make sure that you let us know in the comments which of these is your favorite, and if there are any others out there that are your favorites. For instance, I mentioned, I think the Marshall Bluesbreaker 2, the little tone bug one, that's actually a great pedal. There's the Keeley 1962, there's all kinds of different Bluesbreaker inspired pedals that are out there, so let us know which one you like, which one you use. So again, you just heard it with the Stratocaster, and you notice that when the knobs were neutral, it's almost no gain. Some of them just sounded like a total clean boost with the knobs set fairly neutral. There is noticeable drive when you crank the gain, some more than others, but this pedal was really intended as, you know, not just a clean boost, but something to push an amp that's already driving. So for the next part, again, sticking with the VHT D50, part of the reason I'm doing that is because that's a D-inspired amplifier, and the Marshall Bluesbreaker really surged in popularity due to John Mayer's use of it around the Continuum era. So next we're going to use a Les Paul and go into that on its overdriven sound so that you can hear how it really pushes the amp. And you'll hear some of the pedals kind of do one thing better than the other. Some of them I think sound a little better going into a clean amp and using more of their own drive. Some of them I think sound a little bit better going into the dirty amp and pushing it. They each kind of do their own thing, and within the realm of Bluesbreakers, they do each have their own unique voice. So stick around for some tones for the Les Paul. Thank you for watching. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe, and please remember to follow me on Spotify for some music where you can hear me record with a whole bunch of these guitars and amplifiers that you see in these videos. I'm Jack Fossett, and hope you enjoy the rest of the video.